Hey there, and welcome to the very first episode of the Soulful Speaking Podcast. Who the heck am I, and why did I start this podcast? The short answer is a whole lot of passion and feeling called. The longer answer is going to take most of the rest of the episode. I want to change the conversation in the world and online and in all the places on speaking. Most people think about and talk about speaking as a necessary evil. I believe it's part of our spiritual path, just like money, just like relationships. Speaking can be a transformative and soul-stirring experience instead of just something horrible or a nerve-wracking obligation. I have seen it with my own eyes. I'm an actor, a speaker, a public speaking and leadership coach, and I've spent my life sorting out the gems from the theater, and I'm bringing them to you to help change the conversation. It feeds my soul to share the answers that I've found in my journey on this planet. And it's been a long journey. In some ways, it's like if I tell you my story, it started when I was 7, and I will. And it feeds my soul, and I want to help you face and overcome the same challenges that I had along the way. And voice is kind of my thing. I'm a certified speaking coach, which informs my voice coaching. And I was called with the podcast to get back into oral communication and oral storytelling. I have been acting since I was 7 years old. When I was 7 years old, my mom found me in our garage in our backyard talking to myself. I had my hair pinned up in pin curls like Cindy Brady from the Braiding Bunch, and I had been playing with friends, making up stories, and they, being kids, got bored and went off to the pool, and I said, okay, I'll see you later. I'm going to finish the story. And that's when my mom found me. And instead of saying, what are you doing? Stop doing that, being the wise soul that she was, she immediately took me to an acting class. And that's where I found my people, my weirdos, my fellow outsiders and intuitives and creatives. Theater, like just about everything else in life, has a light side and a dark side. And my soulmates that I was meant to meet here in this lifetime in the theater, I and we have surrounded ourselves with the light side of theater. Theater was the first place I was able to really be fully myself, with a community, a tribe of people who valued creativity, who held a mirror up to things going on in our lives and in the world, and knew how to be present with each other in a way that most of the world still doesn't, and definitely didn't at the time. And I didn't know it when I was 7, but it was my first spiritual zone. And I've spent my lifetime sorting out the gems and the light side of theater from the dark side of theater, the kind of thing that you might see in like the movie The Understudy. It feels like the Mean Girls movie. I've spent my life sorting the light side out, and with things like this podcast, I'm bringing them to you. And acting and speaking are incredibly similar in a lot of ways. You're maybe sitting there thinking, but I'm not a speaker. I'm not a leader. And yet you're feeling called. So it's confusing. I know. I used to be a reluctant leader myself. Many of us grew up with only one image of only one kind of leader, usually a man in a 3-piece suit. And I have had a lot of clients over the years who have said that's not what I grew up with consciously. And yet it's still in there. It's insidious. It's sneaking up on us, sneaking into our subconscious in really insidious ways. And that outdated image of a leader created an equally outdated image of what it means to be a speaker. So if you're thinking, I'm not a leader, I'm not a speaker, but I feel called. And then you go to one of those industrial speaking classes, it only reinforces the idea that that isn't you and you're not a leader. And why on earth are you feeling called to speak? It becomes a vicious circle. Of course, that doesn't feel like you. Trying to be that outdated speaker leader would be like trying to go dancing with someone else's shoes, size 5, on your size 11 feet. The truth is, those outdated leader speakers are not what the world needs now. You are. The world needs change, not more of the same. The world is hungry to have your voice in the conversation, for you to spread your message and share your magic. There's a Hopi elder saying out there that ends with, "We are the ones we have been waiting for." We are. So if you're curious, if you're hearing that whisper from within saying there's something more and you feel like you're supposed to share your unique magic and contribute in a bigger way, and yet you're feeling that like, I'm not a speaker, I'm not a leader in that old industrial outdated way, or it doesn't make sense to your mind, keep listening. Keep coming back here for more. This is the antidote to industrial speaking. What do I mean by industrial speaking? Industrial speaking is that pulled together version of speaking, the one size fits all, those places that believe there's only one good way, even though they might change from decade to decade. One decade, Tony Robbins was the best, air quotes, speaker on the planet. The next decade, Barack Obama was the best, air quotes, speaker on the planet. They weren't the best speakers, and their style certainly isn't the style for you. Barack Obama was the best Barack Obama and is the best Barack Obama he can be. And Tony Robbins was and is the best Tony Robbins, and in fact, the only Tony Robbins. And you are the only you. So what's going on over in that industrial speaking world is humans being humans. We're trying to put things in boxes and we're trying to figure things out and categorize and come up with formulas that can be rinse and repeat and repeated. And most of what's going on over there has these templates and one size fits all that focus on what you say, not how you say it. When I first started my business back in 2008, officially, the only speaking coaches by others I was seeing about how somebody embodied their talk versus what they said was to get up and do it for them. And it's still the most widely known that I'm seeing out there. And it causes a lot of confusion for soul workers, for people who want to speak soulfully, who want to speak with soul. And I've mentioned that speaking and theater are eerily similar. They're incredibly similar. As an actor, I always hated that outside in. The director who stands up and says, "Do it like this." It's actually a no-no in the theater to give somebody a line reading. And a lot of directors still do it because they can't figure out or aren't willing to work hard enough to find another way, to find a way to evoke the performance out of the actors. And in speaking, speakers are trying to do 3 different jobs that over in the theater are actually done by 3 different people. There's a writer who comes up with what is going to be said on the stage or in the movie or in the television show. There's the director, the outside eye, who watches it and pulls all the pieces together in order to tell the story. And then there's the actor, the performer, the one who gets up on the stage and brings those words to life. And if you're feeling called to speak, you're probably going to do all 3 of them. And over in that industrial speaking world, they're not paying a lot of attention to the performer. Industrial speaking are most of the programs out there that the masses have heard about. They've been around forever. I call them industrial because they were created by and for our grandfathers or beyond. They're industrial because, like our education system, they were formed for and during the industrial era. They're rigid, one-size-fits-all programs designed to churn out a bunch of speakers who all look, sound, talk, and dress the same, because that's what was needed in the industrial era. People were being groomed to manage in factories, creating carbon copies, just like we were creating carbon copies of car parts. We ended up with training and education, including for public speaking, for creating carbon copies of the people who made those cars. They're inflexible. And for the most part, they create speakers who are armored up and wearing the mask, consciously or unconsciously, of what the leader for that era was. Some people in that environment manage to maintain their natural radiance, but it is in spite of those programs, not because of them. This show is not your granddaddy's speaking show. For some of us, the sensitives, the innovators, the visionaries, the intuitives, the rebels, the change makers, that over there, that industrial speaking machine, makes us feel like we're trapped in some kind of metal or other hard structure. And I'm here to tell you, if those programs have failed you, it's not you, it's them. It's supposed to feel like a shoe that doesn't fit so that you find another way. One-size-fits-all programs are not the ones you need. If you're a sensitive, an intuitive, a rebel, a change maker, your granddaddy's speaking program isn't going to work for you. Your granddaddy's speaking program isn't going to work for you. You can't change the world from an industrial era, one-size-fits-all, masked up energy. You are the vessel for what you're here on this earth to do, for your magic, your message, to share your presence. You are the only one who can create the change in the world that you are here to create. And you cannot do that from their protective, armored up industrial era mask. So, if it's not that, what the heck is it? Back to that soulful speaking. Speaking can be a soul-stirring, transformative experience. It can be part of our spiritual paths on this planet. I'll fast forward about 20 years from where I left off in my own story. I was busy being an assistant by day and an actor by night, working way too much overall in the Silicon Valley of California. And I was feeling a call to go toward a more aligned life, just like you might be feeling a call. And I was at the point where I was resisting that call with the, who am I? I need to just be the good girl and check all the boxes and things like that. And there was an exercise in my favorite acting class of all time. It was with Richard Side at the Sideways Acting Studio in San Francisco. Most of the time when we worked, we would be up there doing our time for that week with like 1 to 3 other people, let's say. And on this particular day, I was up there all by myself. And people were throwing in these ideas and these vignettes, and I was responding to them. And I kept pulling myself together in between these vignettes, like we do so much in the outside world. And I was particularly, I thought, gifted at doing in the Silicon Valley at that time. And eventually Richard stopped and he took off his glasses, like he did so many times with me over the years when there was something that I wasn't getting. And he said, whatever it is that you're doing in between scenes, stop doing that. Just be where you are and let everything flow, even if that's tears or laughter. And I said, I'm not that comfortable having everyone's eyes on me. And he said, well, then you've chosen a strange set of careers for yourself. Part of you wants this. Part of you knows you're meant to be here. And the part of me that did know that had known that since I was 5 years old, that I was meant to be seen, to be out in front at times, to lead, to be heard, to be understood. That part recognized truth in what he was saying. And all the other parts of me, the protectors, the resistors, the soul suckers, by that point, deeply trusted him and felt safe in the space that he held. So I jumped back into the exercise and continued courageously. I now recognize, looking back, releasing my emotional masks, those jaw tension, I'm fine masks, letting go of my energetic armor. And by the time that exercise ended, it was like layers and layers, decades of protection had melted away. I was going through fire and ice at the same time. And I felt in tune with everyone in the room. I could see through their layers of protection to their hearts and souls. I knew what kind of emotional state they were in, what kind of day each and every one of them were having. It was a moment of oneness. It was my first moment of oneness that I remember that lasted beyond the acting. And what I know now is being seen begins with a choice like that one that I made. It informs my work with the new era of leader speakers. It's vulnerable to let go of those masks. It's risky. We feel totally engaged and utterly powerless. And when we show up fully like that, there's a kind of surrender forward, heart open, and all in. And there may be nothing more courageous than this. So if you're hearing this, and part of you is longing to be seen and heard and understood, but you're holding back because the possibility of some unknown disaster or of doing it wrong or of putting your heart out there and being rejected or not having an impact scares you, you are not alone. You belong exactly as you are right now. Your sensitivity, your intuition, your vision, those are your gifts that you're here to share. You just need help remembering. Speaking is a spiritual path that helps us remember. It's as important to my eyes, the way I see the world, as meditation, and they work really well hand in hand. If you imagine that image of the evolution of humans from hunched over to a little bit more upright to the upright that we are now walking the planet, that's what's going on with our voices. We're trying to evolve as humans. We're trying to raise consciousness, and we're speaking from an instrument, our body voices, that's a couple of generations of consciousness evolution back. Our voices don't match where we are now as a whole in the Western world, and they certainly don't match where we're headed. Thank goodness, speaking is a spiritual practice. We can make the process of evolution, of raising consciousness, faster, easier, and more full by remembering that. By remembering that speaking is that spiritual path that helps us come home to ourselves, our true selves, our soul selves, to connect to why we're here, to, on this speaking spiritual path, meet the world and speak to the world from our souls, to speak soulfully. What do I mean by speaking soulfully? I believe that presence begins, the charisma presence begins where primal body meets purpose. Presence begin where primal and purpose meet. We are capable of a vocal resonance and an energetic resonance that is beyond most of our wildest dreams. Soulful speaking is like the difference vocally and energetically between Madonna in the 1980s, mostly vocally, she had an energy. It's the difference between Madonna's voice and how it hits your body, and Lady Gaga's voice and how it hits your body. The hairs stand up on the back of your neck when you hear someone's voice, feel someone's voice like Lady Gaga. They don't do that when you hear Madonna. And the speaking difference is really similar. There's a resonance and an expansion that happens. And that is the difference between people getting what we're saying up here in our mind and being seen and felt and heard and understood. And the soulful speakers, the one who can tap into that level of resonance and expansion, they have a very different impact on the crowd. They transform the crowd. And you can't get to that kind of soulful speaking, heart radiating out to heart and transforming the world one room at a time, transforming the vibe in the room without going through the doorway of authenticity. You have to let go of those industrial masks to go through the doorway of authenticity. And then the more you breathe and recapture that primal that, by the way, we all had as babies, and connect that to your purpose, your intention, what you're called to, what you're here to do, the more and more soulful you become. Up until that moment in that acting class, I secretly had a love-hate relationship with being seen. I wanted to be heard, but I was scared to put myself out there. I had moments when everything flowed effortlessly. I surrendered to the present moment and found my voice and inspired others. And other times, I felt like I couldn't find my voice. I felt like a porcelain doll sitting in the corner, unable to think or speak or move, just smiling. And sometimes I would speak, or I would play a role in a show, or I would teach, or I would have a conversation in the office in the Silicon Valley. And in all those places, I felt like the real me was trapped inside of some deranged mannequin, wanting to knock on the deranged mannequin's eyeballs from the inside and shout, "Wait, that's not how I wanted to say it." So this life quest that I was on was about how to really be me and speak authentically and powerfully when it mattered the most to me. And after that exercise in that acting class, I left my executive assistant job to study, and I thought teach acting full time. I listened to that voice from within that kept calling me to live a more authentic life. I thought that meant that I was going to be in theater full time and do that and only that forever. And here I am. The universe had something else in store in addition for me. While I was studying acting in grad school, I had another really powerful moment. I was playing a character named Hecate in Macbeth. Sometimes it's pronounced Hecate. In ours, it was Hecate. She's a goddess. And I was playing her in a really beautiful, sacred mask. And less than a week before opening night, I finally got the mask. Just so you know, in an ideal world, working with a character mask is supposed to be a sacred, private, spacious, takes a lot of time process. And we didn't have that kind of time. So I had to quickly channel something from deep within me through the mask in order to unleash the character. During tech rehearsals, where we're supposed to be focused on things like this microphone in front of me and what technology are you using, but the theater version of that, it's supposed to be technical, not creative. And I knew I didn't have time. So that day, with 40 people probably watching, I accessed every ounce of courage I could find. And I walked out on stage and I made slow, raw, primal sounds. I think my first word was have. I had the movements somewhat. So I walked out there and I thought, I'm just going to start with the first few sounds and see what comes out and see if I can find her voice. And it came out, I hope the microphone will pick it up. It came out something like this. Have I not reason? Didn't move that quickly. I just wanted you to know the full sentence. It was vulnerable and intense for myself and for everyone in the room. It was as if I was discovering or rediscovering the ability to speak. It was really crucial in me finding the character. By the end of the scene, I had her voice, and people were shocked. One of my best friends in grad school came up and said, that was incredible. I also now know, now that fast forward, I am a speaking coach who helps other people do the same. I was learning the essence of the path to speaking authentically and soulfully. I tapped into the sound that came from deep within me, the sound of my soul. And I have a visceral understanding of what that feels like in my body. And there was one kind of piece left. I still didn't really think I was a leader. So I still, I kind of had to keep going and move to understand leadership and to move past the part of me that thought of myself as a reluctant leader, kind of martyry. I step up because no one else in the room will do it. And I studied coaching and at the Coactive Training Institute, formerly known as the Coaches Training Institute. And eventually I got called to go through their leadership program. And when I was studying at the Sideways studio, that had a way of rippling out into my life and through grad school. Things would happen for the stage and on the stage, just like things happen for speakers, that would ripple into my life. And when I decided to go to this leadership program, it was about tapping into my soul, being fully me all the time, everywhere, and bringing my soul's voice into my life and into what I was creating with my life. One day we did a tree climbing ropes course in honor of our soul's purpose. And I dedicated my climb to being deeply present in the moment while expressing myself authentically on my voice. I was deathly afraid of heights at that point. Before the exercise started, I was standing on the ground and looking up. And every time my eyes got past about 20, 30 feet, I doubled over and was pre-vomit spitting. And other people noticed. And I decided I would go when it felt like it was time to my intuition, which was after someone else did this beautiful, empowering, take her power back, swan dive off of the plank at the end of this tree climb. And the voice inside of me went, oh, I need to go after that because I need to create the space for the messy. I started the climb honestly thinking that I would get about halfway up the tree and then helicopters would have to come get me. And that helicopters coming to save me thing was in my mind for a good portion of my climb. And I dedicated it to being in the moment and expressing myself on my voice. And that in the moment thing was really like, I didn't look up, I didn't look down. I looked at the parts of the tree bark right in front of my face. And then eventually I started to calm down and I noticed these little berries on a tree next to the tree that I was on. And I actually turned around after having asked everyone else not to speak words, but just to alternate sounds and silence in support of me. I turned around to them and said, did anybody else see the berries? Did you guys notice these red berries? And they're all kind of looking at me like this because I told them not to speak rah-rah cheerleader type words. And they just kind of said, no, don't eat the berries. I'm not going to eat the berries. And then I noticed how far up I actually was, and I immediately turned back around to the tree. And then I said, I was terrified. The terror came in. And I said, I think I'm done. I'm ready to come down now. And one of our co-leaders came over and said, I want to speak to the part of you that wants to get what she came here for. That was my, resistors and protectors and soul suckers. Yet again, someone in my life kind of cutting through the static and speaking to the soul underneath before the rest of me is ready. Okay. And she said, I want you to take one more step. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And taking one more step when you're climbing a tree sometimes means that like one limb stays in place and the other three, plus your core muscles and everything else you've got, have to work to do that one more step, which is what happened with me. I took the one more step, and then I felt this primal thing coming from down low in my core, and I started to suppress it. And then I remembered that I had dedicated my climb to being present in each moment and expressing myself authentically on my voice. So I released the brakes in this throat area. I opened my throat and I let that out. And what that became was a crying, birthing tantrum on the side of that tree that people in the other half of our group on the other side of the forest heard. And on the ground, they all made sounds with me. It was incredible. Like birthing, shouting, primal sounds with me. And when I had expressed everything that was meant to come out, I sort of collapsed. And it felt like a part of me actually died on the side of the tree. And I was completely like relaxed and at rest. And then I felt this energy come up from below me, from where they were. And all of a sudden, I climbed the rest of the tree like Spider-Man. I've seen it on video. It was nuts. The difference between how long and how much effort and how much resistance there was in the first part of the climb, and scaling it like Spider-Man in the second half, and then seeing helicopters again, because life isn't always as neat and tidy as a movie. I'd love to tell you that once I got up, I just swan dived like the person in front of me. I didn't swan dive. I scooted on my butt. I tried to scoot on my butt on a plank to get to the end, which our companion guide, the forest rope climb expert, stopped me immediately and said, you need to stand up of your own power and walk to the edge of the diving board. I like to call it the plank. And it took a long time. And eventually I squatted down as low as I could get and I teetered forward. So it was much more like a tuna in the ocean than the beautiful swan dive than the person in front of me. And what it did was it created the space. Anyone else who hadn't gone yet shared with me that they thought if that barfing, authentic mess can do it, aka courageous leader, so can I. And everyone on our side did. And in that leadership program, I realized that leadership is not about being a man in a three-piece suit. It's not about what you wear. It's not about the titles that you have. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Leadership means being in the present moment and accepting what is here in the present moment, including our fear, our resistance, all our stuff, including accepting the things we don't like, while also moving forward with purpose, with intention, to create the changes that we want to create in the world. It is inside of each and every one of us. And now, soulful speaking is part of my spiritual path. Life, like theater back in the day, all of my life is my spiritual zone. My spiritual work feeds my human experience and the other way around. I'm using my empath, my empathy, my empathic superpowers to do the work that I love both day and night. I still do theater as an actor and a director primarily. I love embodying and bringing to life unique and complex characters that hold a mirror up to humanity. And I also love helping people find their voice, stand in their power, and speak their truth by day. I'm so blessed and honored and grateful to get to witness so many unique and beautiful souls as they break free and allow themselves, make the choice to be seen and then therefore get heard. I love every freaking minute of it. And I'm loving doing this in this form, bringing this podcast. And I want to come back as I get ready to wrap it up to that soul stirring, transformative experience and how it goes, how it can go for you, how it is a spiritual path, how it works. As we listen for our soul's voice within us, which I experienced as like a feeling from deep inside, and then we allow that soul's voice to speak through us to the world around us. We're living the life learning that we're here to live. We're fulfilling, it's part of how we fulfill our soul's purpose. And we're also raising consciousness in the world through voice. And as we live out and have these speaking spiritual paths and practices, the universe helps us by bringing us fire to help fuel this transformation, this coming home to our true selves, our soul selves, just like when we meditate, just like on a yoga mat, but different. The fire burns away everything that is not our true selves. This alchemy is part of how we evolve from fearful speaking and conforming speaking and industrial masked up speaking to authentic, radiant, soulful speaking. Our voices create sound, and sound is powerful. Sound is transformational. Every sound that we make, every word that we say, every silence that we choose is a chance for us to honor our soul's purpose, to feel it out, to live it out and honor it. And every day we have a choice. We have a choice to stay hidden or a choice to step out from behind the shadows and be seen and be heard and be felt and fulfill our purpose. It does take courage to take a stand, to be seen and heard and felt. We have to remember in order to do that, that we each have a one-of-a-kind presence, a one-of-a-kind magic, a one-of-a-kind message, and our very own one-of-a-kind way of transforming lives. What gets in the way is that part of us wants to stay safely hidden in the background. We want to connect. We want to follow our inner knowing. We're afraid that we'll give it everything we've got and somehow fail or get rejected or not belong. And it's visceral. It's not just a thought in our minds. So we play it safe. We stay hidden. We tell ourselves that we're not speakers or leaders and that the algorithms are all stacked against us. It's totally understandable. It's safe in the shadows. And as sensitive visionaries, ambitious empaths, and loving rebels, people who are here to serve others, we'd rather keep the attention over there on those we're here to serve, especially when it comes to speaking. There's an episode of Seinfeld, a joke, where he says, according to most studies, people fear public speaking more than death. That means that when you're at a funeral, you'd rather be the one in the casket than the one giving the eulogy. That's why the conversation has been where it has been in the past. Because we're stopping there. We're going, it scares me. Rather than, it scares me and it's one of the greatest teachers that universe is putting in my way. Playing it safe has kept us safe. It had its place through traumas and challenges that we have experienced in our lives, and yet we're not in those anymore. We are the ones keeping ourselves small. Being seen begins with a choice to make our calling more important than our fear. And now, like no other time in history, we need to hear from the soul workers we haven't been hearing from. The world craves your message, your presence, and your magic. I'll be right here beside you with this podcast every courageous step of the way. And I'm so excited for you and for the people that you are here to serve. Together, we can help raise human consciousness and bring the transformational change that the world so desperately needs. Let's do this. I'll see you back here next week.